So last week we did our top 10 sexiest women in horror. As always, Drumdums is an equal opportunity horror channel. We got to show the love for the guys, so we're gonna do this, okay? We're gonna do top 10 sexiest guys. As with that, of course, I'm gonna leave off some names that you are going to be begging and screaming at me after. How could you not put this name on here? It's gonna happen every time, but just keep this in the back of your mind, okay? This is Lee's list, all right? With a little bit of help from another party. So anyway, guys, let's get right down to it. Let's do the top 10 sexiest males in horror. Let's go. All right, let's do some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is going to be Idris Elba. Now, our horror male heroes come in all different shapes and sizes, and Idris Elba is a great representation for the urban folk. Just a beautiful man to look at, of course, but he's also got a lot of style, a lot of panache, and he's just very commanding. If you want somebody in a horror movie to have like a great detective type role, look no further than Idris Elba, okay? He's just very commanding, very convincing, and pretty damn easy on the eyes, okay? And even though I really hate the movie Prom Night, the remake, one of my least favorite remakes, the one really good thing about that movie to me is Idris Elba, you know? He went into that role as silly as it is and made the best of it. And he shined. He really shined through. Our next honorable mention is going to be Chris Hemsworth. Most of you know Chris as Thor in a lot of the Marvel movies, and I can't think of anybody else to play Thor these days, but we're talking about horror, and of course, Chris did Cabin in the Woods, which is easily one of the most entertaining horror movies to come out in the last decade, and he's a big part of that, you know? Chris is one of those guys that's like one of the greatest looking dudes on the planet, but he also has a lot of charisma, and he's very funny. He can tell a joke. And he doesn't take himself too seriously. And I think that makes a person even more appealing. And Chris Hemsworth, he's got a long career ahead of him because of his choices that he makes and just because of his personality. And our last honorable mention, last but definitely not least, is Jensen Ackles. All right, Jensen Ackles is a bona fide horror icon just because of his work in Supernatural. And I think that the relationship between Dean and Sam, it's like you get your yin and your yang. They couldn't be more different than each other, but yet they love each other so freaking much. But Jensen, you have to have a character like that that's kind of a wisecracking, cheeseburger-eating, just fun-loving guy. He's not the smartest tool in the shed, but he has a big heart, and I think that's one thing that we love about Dean so much. And Jensen's also stepped outside of that role and done a few horror movies on the side. The one that I love the most, of course, is the My Bloody Valentine remake when he plays Axel. And, you know, one aspect of Jensen is that he does have that, like, psychotic side to him. He can really do a great job playing those types of characters. Okay, number 10 is Jason Patric. This is one that I was very excited to put on this list because Jason Patric is a guy that hasn't had, you know, like a Tom Cruise type of career, even though he has the look to do it. And he was front and center in The Lost Boys. And one thing that really worked, I think, about Jason Patric is just that he oozed like mystery. There was something about him that was behind the eyes, that was beneath the surface. And I think a lot of people find that very appealing. And it doesn't hurt that he's a great looking guy. But, you know, he's just a brooding type of character, you know? He holds a lot to the chest, and that makes for an interesting vampire as well. And what was fun about Lost Boys is just watching him deal with his descent into becoming the undead. And really, Lost Boys might be one of the sexiest horror movies ever made. I mean, you take your pick, and that cast really shines. Across the board with Jamie Gertz in there, Kiefer Sutherland, yeah, list goes on. Number 9 is Josh Hartnett. No surprise here. And you know, he's a guy that's way up there, up top, doing a lot of bigger roles, but he still kind of stays anchored in horror. Back in the late 90s, you know, he made his debut with Halloween H2O, The Faculty, and I think in both those movies, he really shined. And one thing that I probably should have said at the beginning of this is, it takes more than looks to be a star. It doesn't hurt that all these guys are good looking, but Josh Hartnett definitely exudes like motivation and passion, and you can tell that he's really into whatever part that he's doing. He's giving it like 150%, and a lot of those like millennium slasher type movies, it seemed like a lot of guys were just kind of checking boxes. They're, you know, male and female, and you know, they were just turning in a serviceable performance. But I think there was something about Josh Hartnett that always kind of rises above the surface, and you know, that's why he's still relevant today. You know, his work in Penny Dreadful is excellent. Number 8, Skeet Ulrich. And by the way, guys, I was watching The Exorcist and it got me thinking about you guys. And Skeet Ulrich, who plays Billy Loomis in Scream, and people love this type of character. He definitely has like a Johnny Depp type of look to him. I guess Johnny Depp with an edge, even though Johnny Depp does have an edge. But man, his work in Scream was so good, just very brooding all the way through. And you needed somebody to play off of Matthew Lillard, who's more zany, more psychotic, more crazy. You know, Billy Loomis is the guy that has that emotional thing going on. You know, he has a stake in the claim. He's the one that's pissed off at Sidney for what happened to his mother. But getting right down to it, he's just that guy with the edge, you know? And I think that is a very attractive quality in these types of characters. Number 7, Wesley Snipes, of course, for his performance in Blade. Iconic. He was so good in that role that it's hard to imagine anybody taking the place of him. And those abs, Jesus, those freaking abs that he has in the movie. But you know, he had a lot of cheesy lines to pull off too. Like, some motherfuckers always want to ice skate uphill. That's not an easy line to pull off whatsoever. And I think Blade, he just has that urban charisma about him that works so well, that's so attractive, that's so alluring. And he's a vampire. And vampires often are like the most sexiest creatures in terms of horror. But the one thing about Blade is, you know, he's a sexy character, but he doesn't depend on that. He's more of a badass than anything. And the sexiness is just a byproduct. Number 6 is George Clooney. I had to put him on here just because of his performance in From Dusk Till Dawn. I mean, this is one of the coolest characters that might be on this countdown. You know, as far as like funnest characters ever in a movie to watch, and with a really unique name too, Seth Gecko. Like, Quentin Tarantino could really write like the best freaking names. It's a great script too, because this is like brotherly love. Like, he loves his brother, Richard, played by Tarantino, so much, and he knows that he's a motherfucker, you know? He's a murderer, he's like the worst of the worst. But Seth loves his brother, and he's gonna do whatever he can to protect his brother. And big kudos to Quentin Tarantino for creating like controversial aspects of a character in a movie that might cause a discussion. But Seth is just that really cool, edgy type of character, not afraid of anybody, even if they're, you know, 10 feet tall. He's right there in their face, you know. I love the scene where the guy starts counting 1, 2, and then he just jumps in his face and says 3. Badass character. Number 5, Jared Padalecki, and this is the one that I might get some arguments on because I know that both Sam and Dean have their fans. And I'm not saying that I prefer Jared Padalecki over Dean. I think you have to have both characters, okay? But Jared Padalecki, he looks like a stallion. You know, he's just a big guy, very built, looks like a statue. So maybe that's why I gave him the edge. Even though some might say that Jensen Ackles has the better face. But I mean, when you're comparing his face to freaking Jared Padalecki's face, do you really lose? And again, you know, I talked about Dean, but Sam is the smart guy. You know, which is funny because he's like the muscle-bound big dude, but he happens to be very smart, very calculated. And I think you have to have his wits to be able to beat all the demons and witches and vampires that they fight. You know, the two work so well with each other. Plus, he's got that long hair, you know? A lot of you folk like that long hair, so no regrets. Number 4, Johnny Depp. No surprise here. Johnny Depp has been a sex symbol, heartthrob, ever since he graced the screen of Nightmare on Elm Street, which, if you look at his performance in Nightmare on Elm Street, very different than what he is now. I mean, he's a chameleon. He can play so many different types of roles. And he's done a lot of dark horror types of roles because of his association with Tim Burton. You know, Edward Scissorhands is a sexy character in a different type of way, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is. You know, he's able to find beauty in unnatural types of ways. And he doesn't even have to do that because he's Johnny Depp and he looks like Johnny Depp. But he dares to go outside of the box and try different things. And he's not afraid to make himself look unattractive, which makes him attractive. But Sweeney Todd is, I think, a very underrated movie. His performance is amazing in that. He sings through the whole movie. It's a musical, and it's bloody. It's got some great bloody type stuff in it. But Johnny Depp's the king. Okay, number 3, Kurt freaking Russell, the man, the myth, the legend. He's Carpenter's secret weapon. Just pick one character, MacReady. MacReady is such a badass. And he's the one character that's at odds with everybody in the thing, you know? And he pretty much has all this stress on his shoulders. He's the leader of the group, the chosen leader to try to figure out who is the thing. And, you know, I think leaders are always attractive characters. When you step up, and especially when you don't want to, but you do it because you want to save everyone else. That's what MacReady is. But then Snake freaking Plissken. Snake freaking Plissken, are you kidding me? Nobody can sport an eye patch like Snake Plissken, like Kurt Russell. He's an icon. Everybody loves Kurt Russell. And he is one of those that transcends genders, you know. Males love him, females love him, and that's a hard thing to pull off. A lot of times they tend to veer one way or the other. But everybody loves Kurt Russell. Okay, top 2. These are big guns, okay? And you might be surprised who number 1 is, because number 2 is Bruce Campbell, all right? If I put Bruce Campbell as number 1, would I be upset? No, not at all. Really, number 1 and number 2, in my mind, are interchangeable. And when I'm talking about sexiest males in a movie, or really even females, it goes farther than that. Number 1 is probably a better looking guy than Bruce Campbell, and that's a tall order, and we'll get to that. But, I mean, Bruce Campbell, again, another freaking icon. I just have to talk about Ash, all right? That's really the character that we're all here for. He is one of those that, dare I say, might be typecast a little bit because of how great he is as Ash, and no matter what role he does. And he's done plenty of other roles outside of the character, but when you see Bruce Campbell, you can't help but think of Ash. And he just gets more and more attractive with each role. By the time he's in Army of Darkness, everybody's swooning. This is my boomstick. He's got that devil-may-care type of thing. He's an action hero. He's a horror icon. And I think Bruce Campbell will be relevant 100 years from now, long after we're all gone. That's how big of a character Ash is. So it's almost like Bruce Campbell / Ash. That's how big of a character Ash is. Okay, here we go. Number 1, Brad Pitt. And I know that a lot of you guys and gals down there are going to be like, this is a horror list. Brad Pitt has done horror movies, okay, guys? He did Cutting Class, and he also did Interview with a Vampire, which is really the role that I want to showcase here. But also Seven. Some would say Seven is a horror thriller. I mean, there's some really dark moments in Seven. But I think Brad earned the spot, 1, because arguably he is the best looking guy on the planet. I mean, am I wrong? Like, can you look better than Brad Pitt? Is that even possible? No, I'll answer it for you right now. It's not. He's Brad freaking Pitt, okay? And he's a great actor. He's done so many interesting roles, and he's one of those actors that doesn't try to go for the obvious. You know, when you look like Brad Pitt, You could easily take roles where you're showing off your looks. He doesn't have to do that. He chooses to go the opposite route and play real characters with a lot of depth, a lot of anguish, some emotion there, and that just makes the guy even more attractive, if that's even possible. But his role as Louis in Interview with the Vampire is just a very vulnerable type of character. This is a character that wanted to die, and he is turned into a vampire against his will by Tom Cruise. Lestat. Although Tom Cruise could probably turn you into a vampire. And so really, the movie is shown through his eyes, through Louis' eyes, through Brad Pitt, not Tom Cruise. And it's a commanding performance, and I think he does a great job in the role. And also Seven, this is a character that's a hothead. He's pretty new to the job, although he does have some experience behind him. And you know, he's just constantly at odds with Morgan Freeman in the role, even though Morgan Freeman doesn't want to be at odds with him. You know, he's about to retire. But everybody remembers Brad Pitt made that hairdo so popular. Because I remember before Seven, the hairdo wasn't as big of a deal. And then all of a sudden, every guy was wanting to get that hairdo. And it's as superficial as it sounds, it is what it is. I mean, Hollywood dictates fashion anyway, and it always bleeds over into the public. But yeah, so Brad Pitt, number 1. All right, guys, let me know in the comments your thoughts on this list. Did I miss big time? So anyway, guys, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Drumdum out.